All right, I want to talk a little bit about Iran and the continuing attempts to try and manufacture a war there. As you're already aware, the European Union said it was going to be 6 months before they could stop importing Iranian oil. The new story now is that they're going to honor all of their existing contracts with Iran, but they are not going to issue any new contracts with Iran. So basically they're looking in the next 6 months to find somebody else who can meet their oil needs, which there aren't really very many places they can go to unless the United States decides that they're going to prop up Europe's oil needs with America's oil. What do you think that's going to do to your prices at the gas pump? Are you ready for $10 a gallon gas so that Israel can move us one step closer to war with Iran, which would mean one step closer to war with Russia and China? I'm not. What the European Union did do is ban all trading with Iran in gold and silver, which is more symbolic than practical, and they did freeze some assets, which is fancy government speak for we're going to steal the money that you deposited in our economy. That's what freezing assets means. You were stupid enough to leave your money in our country, we're going to grab it. What this will probably do is result in Iran starting to pull the rest of their money back into their own country, like Venezuela's been doing. Now, we talked about last week about U.S. General Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was over in Israel talking with his counterpart. And the only pronouncement to actually come out of that for public consumption is Israel will give President Obama a 12-hour notice that they're going to attack Iran. In other words, they're going to ring him up in the morning and say the bombs start falling tonight. And they will not give the U.S. any more advance warning than that, which basically underscores the fact that Israel's in control of this war, not the United States of America. So all this talk about we're not going to give Israel permission. Well, basically what Dempsey just came back and said, Israel isn't waiting for our permission. They're going to go, and all they'll do is give us 12 hours notice to get our ducks in a row, so to speak. Now, over the weekend, a little piece of news came in that the United States is sending another carrier to the Gulf region. They're sending the USS Enterprise. And the USS Enterprise obviously is a well-known name with Americans because of the Star Trek TV series. As a matter of fact, one of the Star Trek feature films, the Star Trek feature film number 4, was actually filmed in part on the aircraft carrier, the USS Enterprise. So Leon Panetta was sending them all off to the crew that they're going to the Persian Gulf in a direct message to Tehran. Now, the USS Enterprise is 50 years old. It's the oldest aircraft carrier in the fleet. It's about ready to be retired. In fact, it's scheduled for decommissioning and scrapping next year. Let's see, here's where it gets really interesting. The Enterprise, one of the earliest nuclear carriers built, doesn't have the one or two really big reactors that are specifically built for large ships like a carrier. So the Enterprise is powered with 8 of the little tiny nuclear reactors that Admiral Hyman Rickover developed for the nuclear submarines. And they are very nasty and very dirty, and both the United States and the Soviet Union have a heck of a disposal problem finding out what to do with these reactor cores that are absolutely lethal to be around. So there's a problem there. It can actually cost more to dispose of those 8 reactors and all the associated machinery as radioactive waste than the scrap metal of the old hull is actually worth. So, here we go. With the derailment or delay of the oil embargo to force Iran into a confrontation over the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. and Israel are looking for another way to get this war going. It's a lovely war, and they want it, and the fact that nobody else does is completely irrelevant. And right now, the U.S. and Israel are looking to find a way to make it look like Iran has started the hostilities, because as long as it's a U.S. overt act or an Israeli overt act, Russia and China have already committed to come into the war on the side of Iran. So in order to prevent that from happening, if the U.S. and Israel can do something that makes it look like Iran has started the war, then Russia and China may stay out. Now, the governments of those countries are not going to be fooled by anything, but the general population, which doesn't want to go to war over Iran any more than you and I do, they may put enough pressure on their respective governments where the government's going to say, well, you guys shot first. We can't come in and help you on that. And so I'm expecting a false flag. And the Enterprise makes a wonderful target. Could be any ship. Could even be the Super Bowl. But the Enterprise, it's a clunker. It's an old clunker. Now, I want to set your Wayback Machine to Pearl Harbor. December 7th, 1941, and the harbor was filled with a bunch of really old, used-up ships. The Arizona was still considered combat-worthy, but was about to be basically converted for training purposes. Her sister ship, the Utah, had already gone through the conversion, was being used to train gunnery crews. That basically is it. All the modern U.S. Navy ships, the carriers and their fast escorts, were out of Honolulu Harbor, off to the southwest, out of range of the Japanese striking force when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. We now know, because of those documents declassified in 1994, that the Pearl Harbor attack was not a surprise, that President Roosevelt goaded Japan into it because he needed it to look like Japan struck the first blow, even though Roosevelt had been poking and poking at Japan for a year ahead of the time. So now we have the situation. We have the USS Enterprise, the oldest carrier in the fleet. The Navy is looking at a huge expense to decommission her and scrap her and deal with those 8 reactors. Look at how much money the U.S. Navy could save if the Enterprise were to sink in the Persian Gulf and the radioactive mess is somebody else's problem to live with. So what I'm seeing that we need to keep an eye out for, and I wrote this over the weekend, a lot of people picked up and went all over the place with it. We know Israel has these Dolphin submarines that Germany was forced to give her. We know they can launch Tomahawks, Harpoon missiles. The Israelis have their own anti-ship cruise missile called the Popeye, and, of course, conventional torpedoes. These Dolphin submarines from Israel have been seen transiting the Suez Canal on numerous occasions. They could already be in the Persian Gulf right now, lying in wait for a sacrificial lamb. Because right now that Enterprise is worth more as a sacrificial lamb. Remember the Maine! Than it is as an actual weapons platform. So you have a Dolphin submarine up real near the coast of Iran. They fire a torpedo. They destroy the Enterprise and sink it with huge loss of American life. And Obama will be up there in Congress saying, "A day that will live in infamosity. Those dastardly those dastardly Iranians." And we'll be off and running again. It's like the USS Maine in Havana Harbor. It actually blew up from a coal bunker fire. The president and the press said, "Oh, no, Spain attacked it. We've got to go to war against Spain." They've done it before. They'll do it again. The only thing that will stop them is if we make them doubt that they will be believed this time. And that's what we're trying to do. We'll be back after news and commercials.
Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about wars, and I emphasize the plural because the United States has invaded, some 10 countries on 2 different continents. Technically, under U.S. military doctrine, it's already a world war. At the moment, it's kind of low intensity unless you happen to actually be on the ground in front of those American guns. Then I guess it's pretty exciting. The concern here, obviously, is that an invasion of Iran is going to bring about a direct conflict between the United States of America, the new Russian republics, and China. China and Russia are already talking about allying against the United States' aggression, the way the rest of the world united against Nazi Germany's aggression in the middle of the last century. We're replaying that history of the last century in front of our very eyes. The only difference is this time the United States gets to play the role of bad guys. So we're now seeing a report from Yemen, and it's backed up by what appears to be some videotape, that American troops are pre-positioned in Yemen. Now, we already know there are 12,000 troops that were in Malta that are on their way to Libya because the Libyan people basically broke into the headquarters of the Libyan transitional government, the one that was supposed to convince the Libyan people that life is so much better under a private central bank owned by private bankers who loan you the public currency as opposed to having a value-based state currency like the gold dinar. And apparently the Libyan people, for some silly reason, they're not buying that. So they broke into the headquarters of the Libyan transitional government, and Obama's saying, "You can't do that. Once we conquer you, you, by golly, stay conquered." So he's sending another 12,000 of your kids into there. And the problem with all of this is those kids out on the front lines, they're not idiots. In fact, they put the smartest ones out on the front lines because they figure they're less likely to wind up dead and, they'll keep the dullards protected. In a way, we're kind of devolving our society by killing off our best minds on those front lines. But they're smart kids out there. And even though they're isolated and even though they're not allowed to read websites like whatreallyhappened.com, even though basically all they know of the world is what is force-fed to them through CNN and military radio and controlled media, they're smart enough to figure out for themselves they're on the wrong side. They're the bad guys. They're not defending America from aggression. They're not bringing democracy. They're invading other people's countries and enslaving them to a private central bank. And they know it, and I get a lot of emails and from people who've just gotten home from the war zones, and they're saying it was nothing at all like the recruiters told me it was going to be. And they find the website, and they listen to the radio show, and they come up and they say, you're absolutely right, what's going on? And they're smart enough to figure that out. And as a result, we've got this problem with military suicides and alcohol abuse, epidemic, drug abuse, epidemic, same thing that we saw in Vietnam. And it didn't help that the CIA was wholesaling the opium into the troops there and then bringing the rest of it back to the United States. Those kids understand they're the bad people. They understand that war is not glorious, it's not good. And as you probably heard on the news break, this Marine who led his unit into these homes in Iraq some years back and killed 24 civilians, including kids. And there was a video of it where we saw this one guy, we're saying, I think this guy's faking it, and one of the troops just pointed the gun at it. It was lying on the floor, not moving, pointed a gun at his head, pulled the trigger, and said, he's dead now. The guy who was responsible for all of this is going to get 3 months in jail for 24 murders. That'll teach him. And we are rightly insulted that Marines who kill 24 innocent people only get 3 months in jail, just like we're insulted that the editor of the Atlanta Jewish Times, he apologizes and he's off the hook for threatening to assassinate the President of the United States. That justice is very much one-sided and biased in this country. But even with such light punishment, I am certain that Marine understands now, looking back, that he probably did wrong. And if he doesn't realize it now, it will come back to haunt him later on. And I saw this again back in Vietnam. A lot of kids I knew went off to Vietnam. Some were drafted. Some were they were ready to go. Yes, I've enlisted. I'm going to go out there. And when they came back, and they were very, very changed. And even when they came back still saying, yes, I did good over there, you could just see over time that inside their head, all of the buried doubts, the guilts started to surface. And it tore a lot of them apart. It absolutely did. This seems like a good point to repeat one of my favorite quotations regarding the true nature of war. Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children. The cost of one modern heavy bomber is this: a modern brick school in more than 30 cities. It is 2 electric power plants, each serving a town of 60,000 population. It is 2 fine, fully equipped hospitals. It is some 50 miles of concrete highway. We pay for a single fighter with 500,000 bushels of wheat. We pay for a single destroyer with new homes that could have housed more than 8,000 people. This, I repeat, is the best way of life to be found on the road the world has been taking. This is not a way of life at all in any true sense. Under the cloud of threatening war, it is humanity hanging from a cross of iron. That was a speech by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, a president who actually did serve in combat and who knew well the horrors of war. And as president did everything he could to pull us back from the brink of being a permanent warmongering nation. He opposed the military-industrial complex. He warned us about it in his farewell address. And sadly, possibly because we were being blinded by the corporate media at the time, which serves the defense contractors and not the common good of humanity, we didn't listen. We got lazy, we got complacent, we were watching Father Knows Best and Leave It to Beaver, and we weren't paying attention as we continued on down that road to a permanent warmongering nation that cannot survive other than through conquest and pillage